Welcome to Babble Over Brews. Deep thoughts ferment over time and text. I'm coming at you, Aaron Crew Juice for Verk, and I've got Gumby.
Hey, what's up?
And I've got William Crazy.
How do you do?
How are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm doing well. Hanging in there.
Awesome. We are going to start the night with Oktoberfest. Oktoberfest is a brief moment of fall drinking beer. The world's biggest fest started in Munich, Germany in 1810 to celebrate the marriage of the Crown Prince of Bavaria to Princess Therese von Sachsen-Hildburghausen. The party was... Sorry, I could not pronounce that. The party was so off the chain, it became an unusual 16-day event from mid-September to early October. It's a time to celebrate beer for beer's sake with food and friends to kick off cooler weather. It is an ABV of 5.3 and an IBU of 15.
Cheers, fellas.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Prost.
And right off the bat, that is an amber
that color.
gold.
Wow, that's
that
pretty.
is beautiful.
Not much of a head on that,
No. And I poured pretty well.
but you poured it right.
That's right.
Attaboy.
Oh, but crisp.
As tradition have it, I'm drinking out of the bottle.
It's good. It's crisp.
Mm-hmm.
Man, it's just kind of refreshing. I'm picking up.
Amber.
Oh, it's definitely amber. Man, this one is definitely it's slightly complex, but light and enjoyable and crisp. And my lord, it almost tastes like if you made a maple leaf from October into a drink.
Reminds me of, in Spanish, we have one called Malta, but it's non-alcoholic.
Oh, I like Malta.
Yeah, okay, you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's made by Goya.
I drink a lot of Malta.
It's kind of like that, but next level with alcohol.
It's crisp. It's not some Oktoberfest that I have are just really overpowering. They're too malty, you know, and it's like but yeah, you're right. Like when you poured it there, you got nice amber, deep amber color to it, and it's got a good head, and you can never get enough good head. So that's.
It's good. I'm not pinpointing any one thing. It's just really crisp, fresh October lager.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably the best way to describe it. It's just a really good, crisp October lager.
Now, I almost like it as much as Franklin's Castle's beer.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh.
Now you're talking my language.
Not to take away from Samuel Adams. This is great.
Samuel Adams is a.
It's a classic.
Really come to like, Franklin's Castles.
Yeah.
Do you guys ever watch CBS Sunday Morning?
Occasionally.
Yeah, so this past week they did a story, if you get a chance, go back and watch it in their archive, on Samuel Adams and how we would not be the United States if it were not for him, because he really was the father of the American Revolution. And they say it's funny because now anyone says the name Samuel Adams, their brain goes to this, and that's like, oh, the bear guy, and it's
right.
like, well, he's a little bit more than the bear guy.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot more to him, and they're like, and they're like, yeah, back in the day, they said, yeah, you didn't call him Sam. Yeah, they're like, that would have been an insult. It's like, oh, he's just another Sam, and it's like, yeah. So no, that you get a chance to watch it, yeah.
Yeah,
You guys will
definitely.
love it. It's pretty cool.
Hats off to Samuel Adams, by the way, for being still, to this day, even despite the mass distribution, they are still an independent brewer.
Yeah.
And that is phenomenal because, most places will sell out to the big five, right? Well, now I think it's a big three. But anyway, I digress. They are still a member of the Independent Brewing Association and have retained the quality of their beer. Still owned by the same family members, and it's awesome.
Good on you, fellas.
Yeah. Well, good sir. Let's see. According to this, you were born in Cleveland, Ohio. in 1975 and raised in the neighboring suburb of Avon Lake.
So it was.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little more about yourself?
Yeah. Well,
It's been since
yeah.
2019. That was the last time you were on. It was literally right at the beginning of the pandemic. So maybe 2020.
Yeah. It was right before the pandemic. Yeah. So let's see what has happened since I was on. Let's see. Oh, the thousands of people have been killed. And they.
Because I remember when you first came, there was this. I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, well, what about social distancing? Because all of this was just starting to take hold in our country.
Right. Yeah.
Do we wear a mask? Is he going to wear a mask? Is he going to want us to wear a mask?
We didn't even know if masks would work or what you used.
Right. So that was the last time you were on. It was
right at the start. So that was right about the time that steaming horse crap episode of Ghost Adventures aired right around that time. If I remember right. Yeah, that was an absolute dump.
to go uphill.
Yeah, and it did, for a time. Yeah, kind of petered out after a little while, but it's been going on 2.5 years now, almost 3 years. So since then, let's see, released a book called Lost Put-in Bay. Came out Memorial Day weekend this year. It's the first book that I had ever written that does not have any ghosts in it. So all the mystery novels, everything else that I'd written has at least a ghost story in it or a reference to it. This one does not. And I think my readers are sorely disappointed. I don't know. We'll see what happens, but it's got some real eye-opening nose to the grindstone research in there. So there's some startling finds. I'll get to that a little bit later, but still at the castle, still playing music when I can, and working on a new book. I'll tell you a little bit about that down the line.
So, what instrument you play? Guitar.
Guitar, yeah, 12-string acoustic. So I did buy a new guitar about a year and a half ago. So
what kind is that?
Yamaha 12-string, and it's got the built-in little pickup amp and all that stuff in there. So awesome. I don't have to put a little Dean Markley over the hole anymore, which used to pop out or fall in the hole, and it's really embarrassing when you're trying to do that and you're playing along, and all of a sudden, what happened to there it is. It's still in the hole, It's
yeah. So this one has its own pickup.
It's got its own. I just plug it in, and then I got the volume, the treble and the bass up here, and so the little EQ. It's all up here, so it's great. So it's just plug and play. So I love it. It's great, and the action is really nice on it. So that's. I
had known that we would have had you brought it here and just play it a little bit.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. I played it a few weeks ago. I was about a month ago. I was at with band Clash of the Tartans. We were down at Terrestrial Brewing, playing there halfway to St. Patrick's Day. We played there on St. Patrick's Day this year, and then I played with a friend of mine, Molly Ryan from Port Clinton, last St. Patrick's Day in 2021. So this is kind of like where we've been playing during the day, and then I do, of course, McGinney's Pub in Lakewood, St. Patrick's Night. That's kind of a tradition going back to about 2012 or 2013, whichever year he opened, I don't remember. It was 2012. So, and that's a great place too. You guys have been to Terrestrial, right? Mm-hmm. You have not been to Terrestrial Brewing Company. Guys, okay. There's a road trip here in our future. I see a road trip here in the next week or so. We're gonna go down there. We're gonna go hit Terrestrial. They got some really good beers.
Prophet of God.
You forced my hand.
Yeah, sorry. I'm like, you guys are the beer guys. You guys are the drink gods here. I'm like, okay, yeah, we'll have to, because we were even talking. We were talking about Collision Bend before we came on the air, and now that's a place that I haven't been. So we're gonna have to do like a little. Now, a couple of years ago, I got the Passport book, and I had been holding on to it since late 2019, early 2020. We picked this thing up. And I had it sitting in my car, and then I got rid of that car about a year ago, and then I got this one that I have now. I have a HHR, and when I was cleaning it out a year ago, I threw some stuff in there, and I was going through it, and I'm like, oh, hey, this is my Cleveland Brewery Passport book. I'm gonna go get it. I gotta finish this up because I got right when the pandemic was about to start, and I walked in, and they're like looking at me like I've got like two heads, and like, what the hell is that thing? And I'm like, No, it's this passport book, and you get it stamped, and somebody who'd been there for more than like a half a year comes on and says, "Oh, they don't have it as a book anymore. It's just an app now, man. We don't actually have the stamps anymore for that."
Times.
I'm like, seriously? They're like, yeah, everything's an app. Nobody carries anything physically around with them besides their phone and their wallet. And
no one
even at
here who
that,
can
it's
write.
a stretch. And I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, because you got to pay over here, go Venmo, or oh, you need to see my driver's license. There it is. It's on my phone. And it's like, oh, that's. It's funny because you leave something at home that was attached to your home 25 years ago. You got to turn around and go back to your home and get it. And it's like, yeah, I mean, well, everything's on there. So it's funny how things. If someone just said, "Oh yeah, you left your phone at home," like somebody told you that 25 years ago, it's like, where the hell else are you going to put it? I'm going to carry the cordless with me or something and drive down the road.
These days you leave your phone at home when you leave. It's like you left a child.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's,
No.
Turn the car around.
If I miss an
I
email.
left my phone at the bar, and then quick call it, and then oh no, it's here, it's next to me. Yeah.
Right.
For our listeners who don't know, because you said at the castle.
Oh yeah.
What is this castle you speak
Oh,
of?
that's right. Okay, so yeah, I forgot. Oh yeah, you might have some
Turn to
new,
this castle.
some new listeners in the last couple of years. So a little bit about me. Okay, that's what you asked me originally. I'm sorry. I guess I got side shot there. So yes, I was raised in Avon Lake, and a wonderful little town it is. It's a great place. I'm also the author of 3 mystery novels, Jack Sullivan Mysteries, and yes, I am getting back to those. I promise you all, I will continue the series. It's been almost 10 years since I released a Jack Sullivan book.
Ooh, it's going to be good.
Yeah, a lot of people are pissed. And I'm like, what happened? What happened? I'm like, well, you read the 3rd book, right? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, well, that's what happened. And they're like, but what happened next? And I'm like, okay, I'm working on it. So it was my ex-wife that really encouraged me to get those published. So I self-published those. And then it was my ex-wife who became my ex-wife, and I lost my motivation to write those because she was my muse. And I turned my attention to nonfiction, which I kind of was doing while we were together. And she didn't like I was spending so much time doing this research is kind of what led to the demise of me marriage. So the first book that I released came out in 2015 as far as nonfiction. Buried Beneath Cleveland, Lost Cemeteries of Cuyahoga County. Found over 50 cemeteries here in Cuyahoga County alone in the greater Cleveland area that nobody knew about. They have houses, gas stations, grocery stores, parking lots, all on top of them. Some of them are up in the woods, and you can go up there and you can find ruins, but you're a little hard pressed. Mostly they're underneath driveways in people's backyards for the most part.
Interesting.
Yeah, so the publisher, though, intentionally asked me to keep addresses of private residences out of the book. And I'm like, okay, I understand that. But it does have GPS coordinates, so you can do that and type that in. You'll see where, okay, just if it's private property, don't go into their yard looking for headstones. Probably not going to find any anyway. After that, I followed it up with a book called Haunted Put-in-Bay, which came out 2 years later, 2017. And I do lead a ghost walk up at Put-in-Bay that is based on that. It's called the Haunted Put-in-Bay Ghost Walk. A very accurate, if not too original name. At the same time that I was writing that, I was writing another book. Now, this is the one that I'd started before all of this, and I was working on it with a fellow named John W. Myers. And for my part, when the book came out, it was 25 years of research because I started it in 92. And then John joined up in 2005. So we kind of pooled our resources and combined what we had, and we decided that we would write a book about this. And the subject was the Franklin Castle, regarded as the most haunted house in Ohio. Definitely the most notorious haunted house in Ohio. So we pitched it around a few times, and it got rejection after rejection after rejection. Ultimately, it got picked up by one of the companies that rejected it, and that's History Press, who I'm signed with now. But we had to cut out about 40 to 45,000 words out of it, which is about half the content. So I'm like, okay, well, I'll just take out every other word. That's not actually what I did. we whittled it down, and we shortened some of the stories a little bit. And we said, okay, this is a little off topic. That's a little off topic. It's great. It makes for a great story, but it's not really relevant to what we really needed to tell. So we got it down to about 54,000 words, which is a lot better than the 90-some thousand that we were sitting at. So that came out also in 2017. And when I met the owners of the house about a year and a half before that, about a year and a half, 2 years earlier, we got to talking, and they invited me to take up residency as their resident historian, because I'm like Rain Man of the Franklin Castle. Like, there's nothing you could ask me that I probably wouldn't know about it. I'm just like a walking encyclopedia on the place. So we could really use someone with your knowledge here. So I moved in the following year. So it was really kind of surreal, because finishing up the edits on the book, I was sitting at a desk down in what had originally been, it's a glassed-in room on the second floor on the main floor of the house. It's original to the house from 1881, and it was Hannes Tiedemann's home office. This is where the man worked. So it's a book about the man in his house, being written in his office in his house. So I'm like, just kind of like, this is really something else. And yes, I have had a lot of paranormal experiences in that house, even while I was sitting at that desk wrapping up the edits for the book. So yes, I'm still there. It's been 6 years now since I've moved in. So if we've had in the time that I've been there, we've had three television series come in. I was on one of them. I'm kind of wishing now that I wasn't. It's a show that gets very adventurous with ghosts. I'll let you guys figure out which one that is. Got enough to say on that. The other two were Holzer Files and Paranormal Lockdown. And while I did help out with them when they were there, I was not on screen on those ones. But after that, 2019, so 2 years later, after Haunted Franklin Castle came out, I released Ghosts and Legends of Northern Ohio, and that's what I was on, I think, talking about the last time that I was on here, which was also the first time that I was on here. So so that explores a lot of the big urban legends from, as the story says, Northern Ohio, so Pennsylvania to Indiana, Michigan, and the lake to about Route 30 corridor thereabouts. So in that little area, everything from your crybaby bridges to witches' graves, haunted cemeteries, railroad ghosts, and of course the big legends of the Helltown. Start off with that one.
Very much.
And I end with Gore Orphanage. I did have a entire chapter on Rogues Hollow that I had to pull out because I was over my word count. So unfortunately, I had to deep six that chapter and one on the Kirtland witch grave story. I had to take that one out also, which was unfortunate. But there was really not much more that I could add to that story. And Rogues Hollow I will be writing on it in a book. Not my next one, but the one after that I'm still working on. I'm hoping to have that out in late winter, early spring of 2024. That other one that will have Rogues Hollow in it. So
okay.
Yeah. I'm assuming you go to the locations too, right?
Oh yeah,
so you've been to Helltown.
Yeah. Well, and Helltown is and that's the thing, and especially Randy Bergdorf over at the Peninsula Historical Society. He hates it every time I open my mouth and the word Helltown comes out of it, or anyone else for that matter, and he's absolutely right, because Helltown doesn't exist. It's not a real thing, and it's not a real place. And I got a lot of flack.
It's real on YouTube.
Yeah, I know, and it's real on that show on Destination America, which is, I love that one. It's like the guy that sits there that leads in, he's the expert they go to. He's the professor of urban lore and studies at Cuyahoga Community College. Your first clue that it's a fake, the guy can't pronounce the name of the county properly. I mean, okay, it's debated, is it Cuyahoga? Okay, but when you say Cuyahoga or something like it's like, no, that's not even close, man. Oh, and also if you watched a program that aired about a year or two earlier, you'd see that he's not an expert on urban legends in Cuyahoga County, wherever the hell that is. He's an expert on mermaids because they had a show on Destination America, Mermaids, The Evidence Revealed, and he was the expert on mermaids from that as an actor. So Helltown was started. This started in the 90s when. Well, mostly little teenage kids are driving around bored out of their head, and they find themselves out in the country, and they see this big fence around this one big area, and these buildings are all kind of fenced off, and there's signs up that say government property, no trespassing. And that's when the stories start to circulate. The government's testing down here. They're doing testing, experimentation. And then they find out, oh, there's a toxic waste dump nearby. And they're like, oh, and there's this bus in the woods where these kids got murdered by a madman. And, oh, there's a church over there and it's got an upside down cross on the front and it's a satanic cult that meets there. And there's, oh, geez, there's a road that's closed and it's a road to hell. And if you go down there, your soul will be dragged down to hell, and watch out for the ghostly hearse and all these horrible things, and hardly any of that is true. The area that was fenced off, and I kind of remember this, that ended up becoming it was near the company town of Jate, where the Jate paper mill sat on the east side of the river. And there is a little train stop there. It says Jate. It was originally it was a town of Vaughan, is what it was. But the Jate paper mill was there, and they also had their company town. So federal government had taken over what had been the company town, and they were fixing these buildings up, and that's now the administrative offices and dwellings for the park down there, for Cuyahoga Valley National Park. At the time, it was still a national recreation area, but that's where some of the rangers live, and that's where the administrative buildings are, and the old company store and all that. So they saw that, and they started freaking out. The story about the murder bus. There was a bus in the woods. Some guy was living in it while he was fixing up his house. There were no kids that were massacred in that thing. There was someone that used to drive their hearse around, and that started the story of the ghostly hearse. There is a church, and it does look like on the front, and it's in Peninsula. It looks like it has a upside-down cross on it, but if you look at it, there's a perfectly upright cross right above it on the top. It's just an architectural detail on Mother of Sorrows Church. And then there is a road that is closed, and it's Stanford Road, and it is blocked off, and you always see the sign says road closed. You probably saw that online. Yep. Yeah, okay, so that's Stanford Road. And it does go back, and that gate does open because the Park Service does have some facilities back there. But when you get around the bend and you're heading down what had been the road heading towards Brandywine Falls, Randy Bergdorf told me that that they stopped maintenance on it because there were no houses on it. It was really an unnecessary road, so they stopped salting it, stopped plowing it, stopped paving it. If you walk back down there during the summer, don't do it on a really hot day, because the last thing they did to preserve the road was they dumped tar all over it, okay? So when you're walking along and it's 90 degrees and it's midday, you're going to start... and you're going to look down at you're putting new impressions into the tar. You're walking in tar, and you're going to be tracking that into your car. Don't do it. Oh. I would say walk in the evening or in the morning, but not in the don't go in the heat of the day. And then as you get closer to Brandywine Falls, I could see kind of why they call it the road to hell, because the road is kind of chasmed a bit, and there are these 4 to 5 foot drops in the middle of the road. I mean, I'm like, well, it's where it washed out, and it's like, oh, that's a mess. So don't walk it at night, okay? Because you could fall in that and probably break your leg. But the one story that is true is that there really was a toxic waste dump there. Oh, yeah, called the Krejci dump. No, I'm not related to them. I got to tell everybody that. They're like, so I got people like, are you from Peninsula or Boston Township? And I look at them and I'm like, are you asking me if I'm related to the largest polluter in Ohio history? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, no, I'm not related. But it's such an uncommon name.
It is very uncommon.
You'd be surprised. It actually is common. It just means Tailor and Bohemian in Czech. So that's all it is. So
I am also Czech.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, yes, you are. Yes, that's right. Yeah, that's a Czech name also. So yeah, it just means Tailor. So that was the John Krejci family that lived out there. And what he was doing was he was repurposing a lot of stuff and recycling a lot of materials and storing things. And the materials that he was storing at the time in the 1930s and 40s and 50s were not deemed as hazardous materials at the time. So it wasn't until later that a lot of these benzines were deemed hazardous. So what he was taking in, it was perfectly legal for him to do. So, but yeah, there was some leakage, and it became a Superfund site. So the federal government stepped in. And it is part of Cuyahoga Valley National Park, and they did clean it up, and now it's cleaned. As of, I think, I want to say around 2015. Yeah, exactly, sure. So, but yeah, Helltown doesn't. So that's just the name the kids gave it. So there is no actual physical geological Helltown. There was a Helltown in the 1800s, and that was a little closer to Mohican, down near Loudonville and all that. So there was a, I want to say it's like on, one of the river. So there was a little town there though that was called Helltown. Okay. Totally different. So, yeah. So we do go after Helltown, and then course, going to the Gore Orphanage legend is another big one. But yeah, everyone loves the Helltown story, and it's like, I have to tell people that there's one, they're like, oh, it's a slaughterhouse. That was later used as a funeral parlor. No, it wasn't. It was like employee housing for a farm. It was where the Hands lived. And the original story said something to the effect like if you stand there, you will see heads floating, or if you're in there, you'll see heads or something. And then it later said, if you go and you put your face against the glass, you'll see the heads floating. Now it's, if you go up and you put your face against the glass, you're going to see the police because it's an occupied house and you're going to be arrested for menacing somebody's. So don't do that either, folks. That's just bad. No, that book really did piss off a lot of people. Because I really did. I feel bad for, kind of, but not really. I squashed a lot of people's favorite urban legends. But these were kind of coming at a cost, though. A great example is the witch's grave. Okay, and pretty much any time that a grave picks up the reputation of being a quote unquote witch's grave, that headstone's days are numbered. Okay, yeah. I mean, go look at the one out in for the Smith family out in Kirtland, which has just recently been moved to, I want to say, one of the churches there. The Historical Society had it. Now it's over at the church, so it's outside again. Okay. So you can go and view that. And it was smashed to pieces. So somebody's kind of preserved it a bit, and they have it out. There's the quote-unquote, the one they call the German witch's grave, and that's out near Columbiana County, somewhere getting out towards Warren and that area. And again, like, I went out there with a couple friends and we took pictures and we talked to the guy that owned the property. He said, yeah, it's my great-great-grandparents. And he's like, yeah, I'm sick of people vandalizing it. He's like, they're just my ancestors and they're in a little wooded patch away from the road. It's just a family burial spot. Please stop going back there. I guess not long after we were there, somebody stole another headstone from there. So that's part of the reason why I'm doing this. I'm explaining these people aren't witches. In most cases, they were Lutherans or Catholics, which is almost as bad. I could get away with saying that I was raised Catholic, or actually I was forced Catholic. Okay. Yeah, Catholic. There you go. So you know where I'm coming. So one guy really went ballistic, and if you go to Amazon and you read the reviews, you're going to see one that this guy actually like tore into me on, and you destroyed my favorite urban legend. That's my favorite story, and I'm like, well, God, he's like, would you just out to debunk stuff? And I'm thinking, I'm like, I hope to God he doesn't read the rest of the book. He's really going to be pissed off. It's like, dude, next time why don't you read the back of the book? It even says some legends will be debunked. Sorry, there you go, there you have it. And then he's sitting there, he's like, yeah, well, that story and this story, those are the same. Those aren't the same thing. And I'm like, yeah, it says right there, it's the same legend. It was started by Columbia Guerin, this lady that she created this Bowman Cemetery witch story, and jumped off of a pre-existing legend. Prior to that, there was no Bowman Cemetery witch, and when you go to Bowman Cemetery out that way, it's an absolute eyesore. I mean, stones are knocked over. There are candles melted on half of the headstones, and there are baby dolls with no heads on them, like scattered about the graveyard. It's like, there's people buried here. This is somebody's family, you know? It's like, why would you do that? And it's because these people are just absolute idiots. And they're fanatical about that sort of thing. And it's like, Jesus, man, just let people rest in peace. Right. So I kind of felt, it was important to, clear up that. Now, I'm not going to, there's an important thing that I got to say here. Is in all of this, I debunked the backstory. I debunked the legend, and I showed them where the legend came from. Now, that doesn't mean that the place in question isn't haunted. Because if there's one thing I cannot do, and will not do, is debunk a haunting. You can no more debunk a haunting than you can prove a haunting. I mean, you can sit there and you can collect all the evidence that you think you have, and I've got a photo of this person walking around, or I've got video of this image that appears and then vanishes, and then I've got this weird light that shows up, and I've got an audio recording of a voice saying, "Help me," when there was nobody there. And you can submit that as evidence. but is it evidence, really? I mean, it's not proof. It's not like the spirit sat down in the chair across from you and introduced themselves and said, okay, let me sit here and let me do this on stage, and I'm going to tell it just to prove that we really exist.
Right.
There's maybe your evidence, but even at that, I'm sure somebody would say, no, it's fake, and I'm sure there's a way they made it fake. But I can do that any more than I can debunk a haunting, and I hate that when some shows come in and most of them are only there for about 3 days filming and 3 nights, and that's really about it. Some I've seen a couple that have been there for about 4, but that's about all they really want to do is they're only going to pay for about 3 days of filming. Yeah. And then they're moving on to their next, project. So watching this, it's like, okay, well, nothing happened in the days that you were there. And I really hate this when I see a show come in and say, well, we were here for a while and nothing happened, so we really don't think your house is haunted. And it's like, you were there for 3 days. What the hell you call that? So living where I live, okay, which is supposed to be the most haunted house in Ohio, and I always wonder where did they come up with, what scale are they using? Like, are they using like that chart from the beginning of Dead Poets Society where they talk about what makes a good poem a good poem? Is it good and high rhyming ability, and good in meter, then it scores high over here. But so I was like, oh, it's really intense and it happens frequently, so it scores really high, and it makes it. I'm trying to figure where that. Tear that page out of your book, just like Robin Williams said. Tear it out, throw it away. Honestly, things will happen there as frequently as every 5 minutes, and as infrequently as every 5 weeks. So it's all over the place. We get times where the house suddenly gets very active, and I have no idea what triggers it. And then we have sometimes when the house is just completely nothing going on at all. And that'll happen for a few weeks. I won't witness anything. I won't see anything. No lights are flickering. No lights are turning off. No lights are turning on. My TV isn't turning off. I'm not hearing footsteps. I'm not hearing talking. No doors are slamming. We'll have a lull for a few weeks. And so if I walk into a house and I'm staying there for a week and nothing happens to me, I'm not going to walk away saying, hey, it's not haunted. I didn't have anything happen to me. Somebody posted, earlier yesterday, one of the Facebook groups that I'm a part of, shared a story that was written earlier, I guess, in the day, about the Franklin Castle, and they just regurgitated the same horse crap about Honest Tiedemann murdering children and driving his wife to suicide, all these really horrible things about the guy, and I'm like, this is I'm just reading it, I'm like, this is terrible. But then I'm reading the comments below it, and someone's like, I was in there in the late 1980s, and I walked around for a couple hours, and it's not haunted, nothing happened to me. And I'm like, wow, because you spent so much time in the house. Yeah, that 2 hours, because you walk into a house and the first thing they do is they jump out at you. Because that's what happens, right?
Oh, yeah.
Haunted
definitely.
house.
I saw that one videos, obviously.
Oh yeah, the one. Yeah, I saw. I'm like, oh God, you got to be kidding me. Oh, that was hilarious.
It is interesting because what, like you said, what makes it happen and then what turns it off.
Or is it even cyclical?
Yeah, or is it something that people themselves bring in from the inside? You know what I mean? Wherever they might be at personally. I don't know. Like, what triggers something like that?
All right. We're going to take a quick, brief moment here from our sponsors while we go grab the next beer.
Have you ever wanted to train Muay Thai? Perhaps there's no gyms near you. Perhaps you work odd hours. Perhaps, like a few of us, you don't like germs. Whichever way it goes, you can train online with some of the best instructors from around the country, either live or in class with other students. Living Muay Thai gives you the chance to do all of this and much more. So jump into live classes and on demand right now. livingmuaythai.com.
Hey, it's Gumby here from Bible Over Brews. Are you looking to get some editing done in your podcast? Maybe you don't have the hours or time it takes to edit your content, but you still need to get it done. Maybe you need a customized track or a song for your podcast or your next project. without having to worry about copyright issues. Well, look no further than soulworkmusic.com, where this footwork is done for you. I'll get that editing, post-production work done right for you, or create you that customized song that fits your project or podcast to help support your life's work. If this sounds like what you need, reach out to me at soulworkmusic.com. Again, that's soulworkmusic.com. And remember, there's nothing taboo over brew.
I don't know what would trigger or turns it on or turns it off, or if it just happens randomly. I don't know, but I do know this. We did have, okay, we have a few rules in the house, things that we just ask if anyone's coming over. We have rules and regulations we ask them to kind of stick to, like don't be a jerk off is one of them. That's not actually one of them. That's just kind of a given. Please don't act like a jerk off. But things like the windows, please don't open the windows and go out on the balconies if you're going to be a guest or if you're visiting. Please no running through the halls. Don't bring weapons onto the property. No smoking inside. No drug abuse. Yeah, things like that. But we also say no sage burning, no table tipping, no crossing over, no seances, no Ouija boards. So somebody wanted to come over at one time and had asked about doing wanted to come in and do a paranormal investigation, and I told him, I'm like, well, we're not open. It's a private residence, it's not open to the public. We were gonna make an exception, let the. And I told him what our rules and regulations were. He says, nope, I can't do it. Really, you can't do it. I thought, because we also had, please do not, you're not allowed to broadcast from inside the house. It's private residence, We're like, we don't please respect our privacy of our tenants. But people want to come in, they want to do like a YouTube live while I'm live from inside the Franklin Castle. Here I am, and oh my God, I'm walking through that. So that's what these guys want to do. And I tell them we don't allow that. They're like, well, we're not coming, because they just want to do it just so they can just, make a name for themselves for the exactly. Yep. So this guy said, no, it's the no smudging. Like, really? Yeah, no sage, no smudging. We put in there no smudge. He's like, I'm like, that's an issue for you. He's like, I have to burn sage wherever I go. And I'm like, oh, that is interesting. He's like, well, my soul is constantly under attack from demons. And I'm like, and you want to come over our house? You're going to bring that with you? I said, no. I'm like, and you're a paranormal investigator and your soul is under a constant attack from demons? Hey, man, you might want to consider another profession. I don't think
you don't see a connection
for you. Maybe you might want to think of another line of work, maybe something.
Forester.
Yeah, something a little, little less. Do something with puppies. I think puppies are good. Demons don't like puppies, I think. I don't know. Flowers. Yeah, flowers. That's a good idea. And I had to explain to him that, no, if you burn sage in the house, it sets off the smoke detector, and that notifies our security company, and they call the fire department automatically. So I said, you can't. Well, I'm not coming over, man. I'm like, well, you're not coming over. That's good. Hey. We did have a TV show come over, though. And what did they do up in the ballroom? Bust out a Ouija board.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, after we said that, and they had a seance.
Did they?
Well, they're doing that, and all of a sudden, they're using the Ouija board, and they're trying to clear. What happens? You get an image of a person appearing over here to the left, and it's like, okay, and then they left. And I wasn't there for afterwards, but my downstairs neighbor was pissed. He's like, dude, after that group left, I don't know what they did. We didn't know that they did this yet. I didn't see any of this until they aired the episode sometime later. We saw he's like, man, I don't know what they did, but man, the house is loud. I'm like, really? He's like, yeah, it's loud. He's like, I'm hearing all kinds, and he was the only one that was living there at the time. And he's like, man, I'm freaked out in this place. He's like, I'm thinking about moving out. He's like, it's just banging. There's people running around. I go up and check it out, and there's like nobody there. He's like, no. He's like, F this place. He's like, I'm just kind of, and that's the other thing, is the house draws weirdos sometimes too. So you get all,
something.
Well, no. I mean, the house just draws weird people anyway. I mean, it's just, you get strangers. I had some stranger try to come in and do a blessing, and he's like, "Oh, it's okay, I'm a minister," and I'm like, "No, that's okay. We don't." He's like, "Can I come in?" And I'm like, "No, I'm working right now. I can't entertain total strangers at this time."
Blessed from the sidewalk?
Well, you got to stay up on these things, man. All the murders in the house. I'm like, there have never been any murders in this house. Oh, well, that's what I read online, and I'm like, oh, and you believe it? Okay, you're one of those.
Yeah,
I'm
they
like,
put
yeah,
skeletons in the
yeah. There was a skeleton found in the wall. That is true. In January of '75, they did find a partial human skeleton hidden in the wall. How it ended there, I've heard a few different stories and I've heard a few different suggestions. So at this point, I can't say 100% for sure which. I have an idea.
Hoffa.
Yeah. Well, if it was, well, no, because when did Hoffa go missing?
I don't know. I was just.
This was 70. I'm trying to think because they said these were old bones, not Hoffa, but that would be interesting if Hoffa was under the castle. It does have a concrete floor now on the first floor. Hey.
Yeah, Prohibition era.
Yeah, Prohibition era. They did find a hillbilly still in there. One of those. They found a Prohibition era still in a hidden room in the house. They discovered it in the 1960s.
I remember you talking about that last time. Yeah.
There's a great picture appears in the book, and if I remember it, it's Sam Muscatello, and he's pulling down a panel that's in the first floor level, and he's pointing and he's showing you where it was found, along with a giant poster of Karl Marx and a big poster of Lenin, and the largest collection of German socialist literature in the United States. So it's in there too.
Well, then there's that.
Yeah, so
Just for an archive or something.
yeah, no, it is a great house. So it's a beautiful house. The owners have done a wonderful job in the restoration. They have a Amish family working at. It's a company called Cherokee Construction. They've done some fantastic work. These guys are master wood craftsmen. I mean, these guys really, generations and generations of Amish know-how passed down, and it shows. It's reflected in their work. Yeah, everything they've done is fantastic. So,
That's awesome.
yeah. So,
So there's a real reason why you ask people not to do any kind of.
yeah, we don't want to piss off whatever might be there.
It's almost as if it's disrespecting, like they feel disrespected.
Yeah, well, people also ask me like, "Oh my God, you live there? Do you ever like paranormal, like do like any paranormal investigating there?" And I'm like, "No, God, no." I'm like, "I live here. No, I don't want to. No, I don't want to do that here." Because one, I kind of don't want to know, and then two, I'm not a paranormal investigator. I write about the paranormal, but I'm not a ghost hunter. And three, I don't want to piss off whatever might be there. We did have a group that came in at one time, and some friends of mine that came in, and I kind of like let them do their thing. And after they left, I remember it was a couple of my friends and their friends that came over, and I talked to them the following Monday, and they're telling me about, well, we didn't get too much, and we picked up. I'm like, okay. I'm like, well, maybe I'll have you guys over again. You guys can. They're like, I'm like, what's funny though? I'm like, after you guys left, though, I started hearing all this. And I'm like, the hell? I thought when you guys left something, it was banging at the door. So I went downstairs. I'm like, wait a minute, the gate's locked. How the hell? Unless you forced your way in through the gate at the end of the driveway. And I go and open the door. There's nobody there. And I'm down there and I start hearing, and I realize it's coming from upstairs. So I go upstairs and I'm standing on my level right outside my apartment. I hear, and it's coming from up in the ballroom. And I go up in the ballroom and I stand there and I hear, and it's downstairs now. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to bed. I'm this. So so I told them about this all this knocking that after they left, and like, oh my God, really? And I said, yeah. And they're like, well, because the entire time we were there, we're like, if you're here, can you make a knocking sound? And we wouldn't hear anything. I'm like, are you serious? And they said, yeah. And I'm like, well, yeah, well, after you left, they made sure that they waited until you left and like, oh, hey, you want to bring people over that want us to knock? Here's your knocking. Yeah, you want a knocking sound? Yeah, here, good luck going to bed now. Yeah, have fun watching Kolchak the Night Stalker. We're going to keep knocking all night. Yeah, it's...
That'll teach you for bringing them over.
Yeah, so I'm like, okay, I get it. So I don't want to piss off anyone or anything that might be in the house. So
that is interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Now, do you keep, I don't know if you can or if there's rules against it, but do you keep like cameras in the house so that people don't break any rules or things like that? Or
it's a great question. Not well, I won't go into the extent of the detail of the security of the house. There is video surveillance.
Okay.
Where it's pointing. Not going to go into all the places. Obviously, not like in my bathroom. I don't have a camera set up. That's weird because like friends come over and they got to pee or something. That's just kind of strange. But we do have. You can see some from outside. We have some going around the house, so the whole house is secure. So if porch pirates come by, well, we got them. So yeah, we did, and we did. So yeah, that's yeah. So the exterior is very, very well monitored. There was a carjacking a couple of years ago, and I remember the police came by afterwards to see the footage, and I think that might have helped them. So it was broad daylight too.
Oh wow.
So yeah, it was nobody. Yeah, they weren't from anywhere near. It really is a safe neighborhood. It was random. So yeah, we don't have a. It's not a violent neighborhood.
So you haven't had anything like
from
pull
it.
your covers off or anything all the night?
Oh, you know that's funny because my bedroom is a bedroom that supposedly happened in. That story, yeah. So my bedroom is what had been Louise Tiedemann's bedroom. As I understand it, it is the bedroom on the third floor that was occupied by the two brothers that lived there briefly during the 60s. As I understand it, this was a room that was occupied by the son and the daughter-in-law of a doctor that owned the house. They also reported blankets being pulled from them as well. So I more than anything, I tend to crash out on the couch. Not because I'm afraid of the bedroom. In fact, it's a very comfortable bed. But I have trouble sleeping sometimes. So insomnia. So I find the best thing for it is to put on something that's either something I really want to watch, like on Nova or something like that, or not exactly a movie. I'll get into a movie. Or something that I've seen like at least a dozen times, like Extraordinary Tales, the animated Edgar Allan Poe thing. And I'm halfway through Bela Lugosi narrating The Telltale Heart, and I'm out. I mean, I wake up and it's 8:00 now the next morning, and I'm refreshed, and I crash on the couch. Sometimes I'll wake up and I'll go crawl into my room, in the middle of the night, and I'll sleep out. That is a really comfortable bed. But that room was what was historically also called the cold room. And for some reason, if you keep the doors closed and it's spring or fall or something, and the boiler isn't running because right now there's 2 radiators in there, so during the winter it's hot as balls in that room. It's about 10 degrees colder than the rest of the house.
Okay.
We don't know why. We cannot figure that out to save our lives, but for some reason that room, and only that room, is colder. I have a copy of the tour book that you would get when you went on the tour back in the mid 1970s. A fella traded me a copy of it was his dad's copy of the book and his dad's bumper sticker. It says, "I've been to the Franklin Castle," and it's also from '74, and it's sitting on my shelf right now. I traded that to the fella for a autographed copy of Haunted Franklin Castle, and I was already familiar with it because I had read through it because a lady who had written 2 articles on the Franklin Castle. She was a freelance writer. She had rewritten that for the 3 fellows that owned the house at the time. So, I hate this. I'm drawing a blank on her name right now, and it's I could say because we even included her in the book. Her daughter. I remember her daughter's name, Rachel Caesar. She let me borrow her mom's notes, but I'm drawing a blank right now on the name. I'm Space Cadet tonight, so.
Not a problem.
Yeah.
Samuel Adams' fault.
Yes, I blame you, Samuel Adams. Damn you, father of the revolution. Yeah, I'll remember her name in a bit. But yeah, she had rewritten, so I'd already read her notes because her daughter, Rachel, had photocopied all of her mom's notes for me. And it was in there. So it was her revisions to it because she had done extensive research on the house. So I ended up with this. But it's great because it describes that room as the cold room. And it's kind of like, I am sleeping in the cold room, which is really, it's regarded as the most haunted house in the room, or most haunted room in the house. Huh. So my bedroom is the most haunted room in the most haunted house in Ohio. So
and that's why I sleep on the couch.
Yeah, there we go. And
that's where the satanic sacrifice was.
That's exactly where the satanic sacrifice was. Yeah. So you're gonna edit. So I'm gonna edit. So that's where So he says that's where it's kind of like that show about adventurous ghost people that cut things down so that I'm saying something that didn't quite say what I said, and yeah.
We're trying to cut all of the extra stuff.
Yeah, that's what I was told. Yeah, we're just trimming the fat. That's not what I said. So now anytime I sit for an interview, I make it a point to.
Where were the bones found then?
The bones were found on the floor that I live on, actually really just beyond where my kitchen ends and the front suite on the third floor begins. So there was a wall there, and at the time, Sam Muscatello, who was one of the 3 owners of the house, he was knocking through this wall to expand the room, and he went in there and he looked in there. He saw there's a bit of a void in here, and he looked in there, and on the floor were partial pelvis and 2 femurs. Well, where's the rest of the person? Like, what happened to the rest of the body? So that raises some questions there in itself. I've heard a few stories.
This was what year now that was?
January of 1975. I was not even a glint in my parents' eyes. Actually, no, I was about the size of a head of a pin at the time. It was about the time I was conceived, or maybe a pea by that point. I don't know. I was born that September, so.
But I'm assuming it's 1975. They find bones, and there had to be some kind of investigation to the bones, or.
Did they ever carbon date them?
And they weren't doing that. Dr. Lester Adelson was the medical examiner at the time, county coroner. Looked at him, determined that if it was he really couldn't even determine gender. He said it was a man. I believe he said that he would have been about 67 inches tall. If it was a woman, a little shorter, about 64 to 65 inches. He said they were brittle to the touch. They were very old bones. That's really all that he could get from it. I believe that the bones were then gathered, placed into a small box, and they were interred at the Potter's Field out near the big cemetery out on the east side in Warrensville Township. Yeah, so there is a Potter's Field out there, and that's where most of the victims of the Cleveland Torso Killer are laid to rest. And there's no headstones for these people, but of course they know where they are because they have to dig them up and do a post-mortem again or something like that. And there is a monument there for everybody, pretty much. Highland Park Cemetery. It's out on the east side of Highland Park Cemetery. And I think I think you can get to it from like Richmond Road or something like that, but it's not really marked. But that's where those bones ended up. So I did read the coroner's case file. I didn't get to see photos of it, though. And I don't know if they had those in there or not.
So what could we imply from that? Somebody
suggested that they were planted, but I do have it on the highest authority directly from people who were there. Sam Muscatello did not plant those bones. And that's a fact. I mean, he was freaked out. He called the police. He made the report. If he planted the bones, why would he do that?
Yeah.
Because then he would just be throwing himself under the bus. No, the lady that was there, that was with him, she swore testimony she said, I'll swear on a stack of Bibles. He did not plant them because he was, not only was he freaked, but he was pissed that these were here because then he had to stop what he was doing. And I mean, he was angry that these were in the wall. So. This is not a man that planted them, so Sam Muscatello did not plant those bones.
So the possibility could be a murder?
Well,
buried, or somebody was built a wall behind them?
I think that it's possible that they might have still been planted, but not by him.
Okay.
So we think somebody was,
Hiding something.
well, if we think it might have been. It's hard to say, but we do know this is that a partial pelvis and 2 femurs were found in the house. That's really all we know.
Gotcha.
And then we know
else is
the
speculation.
Yeah, because I did hear a couple stories beyond that, but they conflict with each other, so it's hard to say which is which. So we're kind of right now, we're just kind of leaving it at, there were bones found here. This is where they were found. This is what they were. I don't want to speculate beyond that, because if I do, then I'm implying grave robbing on somebody's part, and that person is still alive. So, so I don't want to. Yeah, so that's one of the things I'm gonna kind of. We're gonna go around that one. So I don't, because really I don't know. Somebody did tell me a story, but I don't want to. That's not a road that I want to go down, because then there could be legal ramifications.
Had to bring up the one thing, Aaron.
Yeah. Oh no, I don't mind telling anybody about it. It's great, because it's this fantastic story that these human bones were found in the house. So there was once a partial human skeleton there.
We had
How long it was there, we don't know. So.
a legend and lore of that right here in Old Brooklyn at Wexler's Tavern.
Oh really? I know Wexler's. I haven't been there in.
I don't even know if they're
Years.
Wexler's
It's
anymore.
now Bar 17.
Oh, is it? It's
Yeah.
not Wexler's anymore, is it?
Yeah, no,
You
it's
could just Google it,
my little buddy.
and yeah, apparently some kind of bones were found in the basement.
Oh, that's wild.
Yeah.
Oh my god. You know what's really funny is when you find, and this is great. This is really good lead into the new book. So I'll tell you guys. I do have a surprise, and I made an announcement about it last night. I was giving a presentation on Franklin Castle out in Rocky River, and I said, "Okay, folks, and I will have a surprise for you." And the surprise was, I do have a new book coming out. So a lot of people are like, "Well, you're going to tell a new ghost story?" No, it's not a Jack Sullivan mystery, although I am working on those, and I'm developing another series too. The new book, I just signed the contract on it about 2 weeks ago. It's going to be stories from Cleveland's haunted past that more than likely you've never heard, because these are stories that have not been written on since they first occurred over 100 years ago. Most recent that I'm touching on, 1915. The oldest, 1840.
Wow.
And at 1840, that makes this Cleveland's first reported haunted house. And so readers will finally get that story. Like, that's really the first one. There are going to be a few familiar places. Like, one of them is Erie Street Cemetery. Now, that's the one that's over down by the ballpark. I think everybody has been through that one.
Oh yeah.
So if you've been through there and you've ever been down there with any of the ghost groups, the ghost tours that go through there, Haunted Cleveland tours, they used to stop there. I don't know if Chuck and Beth do anymore, but it was always a fun stop because they would talk about Jack Osat, the Sauk chief who was buried there. Jack Osat, the walking bear. He died in the 1840s. He was a member of the Sauk tribe, although it says Sauk chief on his headstone, but we don't believe he was a chief. He wasn't old enough. He was, I think, in his 30s when he died, so he wasn't chief. But he was a Sauk warrior, and he fought in the Black Hawk Wars. And he was on his way back from London. It was in London on a tour. And on his way back home, he stayed with friends in Cleveland. He got sick and he died. And they buried him in Cleveland, and they say that, and his headstone is still over at Erie Street Cemetery, and it's lying flat on the ground. It's broken up into a number of pieces, and they say that Jack was sought, that he haunts the cemetery, that he's angry that he's not with his people. And it was said that if you go there, buried next to him is Chief Thunderwater. Now, Chief Thunderwater was a Native American fellow that lived here in Cleveland. I want to say he died sometime in the 1950s or 60s. He was cremated when he died, and his ashes are interred right next to Jack Osat. And people say that he did that just to help set Jack Osat at his ease, and ease his soul and ease his suffering. That's not really why, as far as I know. I think he wanted to be buried next to another Native American. He was also Chief Thunderwater was member of the Early Settlers Association of the Western Reserve, and he was one of the men and women who fought to preserve and keep Erie Street Cemetery. In 1926, it was approaching 100 years old at that time because it was established in 1826. And as it was about to celebrate its centennial, they were moving graves from there out to Highland Park Cemetery and just pretty much reburying people in mass graves without their headstones. So he didn't want this to happen. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that Jack Osat was buried there. So he worked with, and he was, like I said, he was a prominent member in the Early Settlers Association. And they all worked together, and they saved the cemetery. So that's why it's still there. The city wanted to do they wanted to turn it into a park. They wanted to put Carnegie Avenue down the middle of it instead of down what was then called Ohio Street. So they wanted the bridge to come through there. They had all these ideas, things they wanted to put buildings on it. They just thought that the space could be better used than as a cemetery. So that's why they started moving people around 1900, somewhere in there, late 1890s, early 1900s. But he was the one that saved the cemetery. He really was. And his ashes are interred there right beside Jack Osat. So I was on Mike Trevisano's show about 7 years ago when Haunted Cleveland or Buried Beneath Cleveland came out, and they were like, they're asking me, is Chief Wahoo buried at the cemetery across the street? And I had to explain to them that Chief Wahoo is a fictional figure. That's not a real person. I'm like, I know what you're talking about. They were talking about Chief Thunderwater because he used to come out and do a war dance before the games and stuff. So for the Cleveland Indians games, so that's probably who you think you're talking about. But no, that's not Chief Wahoo. That wasn't even the inspiration for Chief Wahoo or anything. So, but people will say, and really the story only goes back to the 1990s, that Jack Osat haunts Erie Street Cemetery. Now realizing that there is, in fact, a ghost story that goes back 130 years before that. That was very, very, very prominent in Cleveland news for a couple of years. About a cemetery ghost, about this ghost over there. So, and that's going to be one of the first stories that I reveal in the book. There are a couple of stories that some readers may find familiar. One of them, and this did appear, this is one of the two stories that did appear in another book. So the premise is basically these are ghost stories that haven't been written about in any book, newspaper, article, website, covered on any newscast since they were first reported over 100 years ago. There are two exceptions. One of them is a story about a hotel that was located downtown, and a man was accosted by a ghost in his room in this hotel. And at the very same moment that that happened, he hears a scream from out in the hall, and it's a lady that occupies the room next to him. Her sister had been staying with her, and her sister had just died.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so at the same moment that this man was attacked. That's what has been published, and there's a book one book did tell that story, but that's all they told. The haunting followed the body. Beyond the hotel, and they stopped there. It's like, no, there's more to the story. You the best is yet to come. Wait till the body gets to the funeral home, to the undertaker's parlor. That's when all hell breaks loose. So they only covered the first half of the story. The other one is a story that appeared in a book by one of Cleveland's prominent true crime writers. I won't say who he is. I don't want to go into that, but really he's he's great. I have like 4 of his books. He's one hell of a writer. But one of the stories that he put in there was a story about a murder that had occurred at an inn out on the east side. And I mean, this murder goes back to the 1840s. This guy had, in the story, he accidentally kills us. He was trying to kill a guest at his hotel, murder the guy in the middle of the night, but accidentally, in the story, stabs his son to death. And when bringing the body downstairs to bury in the basement, that's when he realizes it's his son. And by this point, the guy who had been staying in that room that hid when the whole thing happened had climbed out a window and got the neighbors, and they come over there and they break down the door, and the guy pops himself in the temple. And takes his own life. And this story gives dates, it gives names, it gives everything, locations. It's like, oh my God. Now it's interesting to me because a few years after that story ran, which is many years after the story takes place, somebody talks about how they went in and investigated that house because it was supposedly haunted by the son who was murdered. And it's like, oh, that's interesting. So I had to find everything I can about this. I was really thrown for a loop because at the time the house of the building in question was being torn down. It sounded familiar. It sounded like the story of the old inn that is haunted by the ghost of the rich person passing through who was murdered by the innkeeper, and they buried the body in the basement. You've heard this story. It's an urban legend that goes back well over 150 years. This is one of the original urban legends about the old inn that dates back to the early 1800s. And sometime during that time, I'm going through, so I'm like, well, I got to find out. And it gives names and everything. And this guy wrote the whole story pretty much as it appeared in the original article from around the early 20th century. He even uses the illustration from the paper, the illustration that accompanied the story as the illustration in his book. I went through every newspaper from that period. I did every possible search. I widened my range to 25 years either side. I went through coroner case files, which are all over at the Cuyahoga County Archives. Wow, I found some really wild stuff in there, like signed confessions to murders in those files. They're the originals, as well as a sworn affidavit of a boy who's dying after his father killed him. And that's the story. It's based on that story that this guy wrote, this true crime writer wrote. It's not true. One of Cleveland's most prominent true crime writers inadvertently wrote a fictional story, a story that appeared in the paper, and it was fictionalized. It was an urban legend about an old building. And it was something that the neighbors say. The names used are not real people. There's no such person that appears in any census. There is no such person that appears in any of the county. It says the guy was a prominent property owner out there. Not in any of the county tax records. He doesn't appear in there. There's no name even close to him. Nothing at all. It says there would be a coroner's report. There would be a newspaper article. There would be something. None of it exists. But then I did find a real murder that did happen about 20 some years after the supposed one happened, where a guy didn't murder his son. He didn't stab his son to death. He stabbed his two stepsons to death, and it was intentional. And I believe that it's a mix of the old legend, because I did find a story about the old haunted inn with the bones buried in the basement, and it's the exact same story. It's the same setup, but it turns out that it's his son. Somebody mixed these two stories and wrote it for one of the Cleveland papers or in the early 20th century as a story. And about this one old creepy building out on the east side. And that's where the inspiration for that story came from. And like I said, over in the archives, I held it until I can pull it up on my phone and I can show you. I took pictures of the sworn affidavit as Edward Quayle was bleeding out, dying from his wounds. His brother is already dead, and he signs with his mark and a little X as somebody was writing down him saying, "I believe that I'm dead." And our stepfather did this, and he says why. They arrested the stepfather on the spot pretty much right away, and before he went to trial, somebody snuck him in a razor blade. Cut his own throat in the jail. Wouldn't even go on trial. So he's buried over at Woodland. The boys are buried over at Beechwood Cemetery. So, yeah, in an unmarked grave. And so is his.
Can you share, or do you know what the motive was?
Okay, so the motive was this guy had recently married their mother, who had been widowed not too long. And apparently he thought that she had inherited everything, the farm, everything. So he thought by marrying her, he would inherit everything, not realizing that her late husband had left everything to his 4 children.
Oh.
But that they would take care of their mother for the rest of her natural life. Nothing about it going to her, because he knew that something like this might happen. So he had 3 sons and a daughter, a very young son, about 11 or 12, who he loved dearly. Oh, such a good little boy. He's so nice, and he's so great. He always treated him with kindness. The daughter, if I remember right, was the eldest, and she was married and out of the house. So she owned a quarter of, her and her husband owned a quarter of the property. But that left his 2 stepsons who were like 18 and 20, Edward and Henry. And he tried to get them to sign this over, their half, or their part of the land to him. He said, no, because that way I can just manage it better, and I can take care of the taxes, and I can handle everything if it's in my name. It'd just be easier if it is. And the guy was a habitual drunk. He sailed a lot. He was a rover. One of the Manxmen from the Isle of Man. There were a lot of them, and a lot of Manxmen in the area. And when he died, he was ultimately buried by his fellow Manxmen. They covered his expenses. Well, the elder brother went to Cleveland with some friends and had the property put in trust, so his stepdad couldn't touch it. He came home and told him what he had done, and his stepfather was in a drunken rage and tried to kill him, and his younger brother tried to intercede, and he stabbed the younger brother, and then he turned the knife on the older brother. The younger brother died on the spot. The older brother died and lived until the next day, and signed a sworn statement that it was his stepfather, John Cool, who'd killed him. So that's the real inspiration for.
We're mad when our ghost stories get debunked, but there's so much more evil like that in the world.
But that's the thing, though, is that this was never a ghost story until I found out. See, it was just a true crime story, but I found out that a couple of years after that story was released in the paper in the early 20th century, is that house, as they were getting ready to tear it down, was regarded as a haunted house. Somewhere over there, now I have an idea where it was, can't pinpoint it exactly, but got an idea, so I'm going to kind of throw the intersection just where roughly the settlement was located. So it's not one of those cases where I can give you an exact. There was a story, and I felt bad I had to remove this one because there was a story about a haunted house for rent on Lake Avenue, which is now Lakeside on the downtown side. And I thought I had the house, and then I found an article saying that wasn't the house and that it wasn't even a brick house and people were congregating at the wrong house, and I had to say, shit, I had to throw the article to the side, and I have another story that I'm replacing it with. That it was kind of on the back burner there a little bit. So you will get 30. Promise you'll get 30 real hauntings. Again, there is no debunking of a haunting. In fact, quite the opposite in this book. You're going to get ghost stories that I almost guarantee you have never heard before, or at least you have never heard the true story, the whole story all together. So you're going to get everything. I mean, we got haunted jailhouses. We got haunted houses that people are throwing rocks through the window. And, this is, and I'm starting off. I've seen this a few times. Watership Down is one of my favorite novels. Have either of you ever read Watership Down?
Nope.
By Richard Adams. It's a great book. So he starts off every chapter with like a little line from a poem or a passage or something. So I kind of did that in this book. So you're going to get some passage from a classic novel or from a poem that is going to give you a little bit of a foreshadowing of what to expect in the chapters. So there's a line from Frankenstein when I talk about the old homeopathic medical college graveyard. From 1885 is another story that'll be in there. So there's a line from Frankenstein where he toils in the damp soil, and it's the grave robbing. So that's in there. But there's a poem by Thomas Hood. It's called The Haunted House, and it's very long. So I just grabbed the which I guess would refer to is the refrain. I guess the part that repeats itself, and I put this in front of a story of a suicide and a house that was haunted in the weeks afterwards that they tried to rent over on Prospect. And the line goes, and this dates to about 1843 or so, and Thomas Hood wrote this, and he died the following year. But the line that's repeated about 4 times, 5 times in the poem says, "O'er all there hung the shadow of a fear, a sense of mystery, the spirit daunted, and said as plain as whisper in my ear, the house is haunted." So that's one of the lines that's right there, and it says "From the Haunted House" by Thomas Hood, and then it goes into that story about this mansion on Prospect, where this suicide and then this ghost of this hanged man appeared up in the garret. So I do that with all 30 stories. You'll start off by reading some sort of something that's going to lead you into it. That makes some like, ooh, this one's about a hanged man, and it's a line from Voltaire about hanged men and are good for nothing, and it's like that punishments should suffice and stuff, and it goes into how someone was seeing the ghosts of these men that had been hanged in the prisons. So that's it's a wild story. So this one's going to be an absolute wild ride. I'm loving where this book is going to go. So we're expecting that next September. So
Okay.
yeah, so.
Join us in part 2 for the rest of the conversation.